Welcome to this edition of the Healthcare Startup Meetup. Slightly smaller group today, as probably everyone's on summer vacation except 9 people here today. I won't talk too much and just give you like a very brief overview of what we're doing today. So today our guest is Tatyana from HealthCaters, and it's really cool that she actually made the time to be with us here today. Um, I'll talk about our agenda very briefly, but before I start talking, one important point is that we're recording this talk and putting it on YouTube. We always did in the past with all other meetups too. So if you don't want to be featured on it, and if you end up speaking, I guess just don't speak. So that's just like FYI. And that's pretty cool for the others because not everyone can make it like today, so they can watch it on YouTube later. So what's the plan for today? It's not super long, so we are here in a very brief interjection, 5 minutes, just me talking. Then Tatyana will talk about her startup, which she co-founded, HealthCaters, for a short while. And then afterwards, we'll move on to, I guess, the most important and the most popular section of the meetups, which is the Q&A section, where you can pretty much ask all your questions to Tatyana. And how can you ask that? It's, oh man, I have to skip ahead a bit. You have this Q&A feature in here in Google Meet, I think, and I think it should work. Yeah, it's already activated. So if you click on this like fancy symbol in the bottom right corner, you can click there, and then you see this menu, and then you click on Q&A, and then you can enter a question there, and then people can upload them or download them. And that's how you ask questions. You can already start typing, for example, while Tatyana is presenting her startup, if something comes to mind. I've also prepared questions in case people are shy. So just a very brief segment about us. So our company is called Open Regulatory, and we're essentially just a consultancy for medical device compliance. The topic is very boring, so I'll keep it very short. Our goal is actually to get unemployed. So we want to make this very transparent. We publish all our templates for free for medical device compliance. We have a free Slack community, and we have a free software for getting the compliance done. It also has paid tiers, by the way. So that's how we pay our salaries. And we do consulting too. So if you don't know us yet, go to openregulatory.com. And that's where the ads end. And then I'm already done, and I'll actually hand it over to Tatyana from HealthCaters. So if you want to share your screen, Tatyana, feel free to share. Otherwise, feel free to just talk. I'll stop sharing my screen right now.
Perfect. Thank you for the intro, Oliver. Very nice to be here. And although we're a small, cozy group, I hope that it will be useful and productive for at least some of you. And I'm always super happy to have questions because questions make you think. And a lot of the times that's the most important task of the founders. And we don't have time for it otherwise because we have so many things to do. So super happy to be here today. I will briefly talk about HealthCaters and what we do. And if at any point you have any questions or something is not clear, feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, I will just begin. Maybe just a very brief intro about myself. So my background is actually in corporate finance. I've done investment banking. I've done private equity investments and venture capital. And before I co-founded HealthCaters with my co-founder, who is a doctor, I actually worked for a startup building up health insurance products in Europe and UK. And this was ultimately the bridge for me to switch from investments into actually building a company myself. So what do we do at HealthCaters? We build Google Analytics for corporate health. And I think although it sounds cool, it's probably not really clear why we do this and what it means exactly. So first of all, let's think about health for a second, because no matter what angle and area of health we are trying to tackle, what kind of problem in health we're solving, ultimately we need to zoom out and look at the macro level. And what we're seeing on the macro level is that, unfortunately, 90% of Europeans don't have adequate access to preventative care anymore. And it might have been the case for other countries in the past, but I think Germany has been kind of doing well until very recently. But COVID exploded that. And now most people between 30 and 50 years old have a huge gap in care. And why is this a problem? Well, first of all, because that's the most productive group of the population, right? That's the prime age group that is working. And at the same time, they start having their family, they start taking care of their elderly relatives, so their time is extremely limited. So if you overlap that with the decreasing capacity of the medical system, you see that these people will just not go and see the doctor until they really feel sick or until they really feel pain. And that's a huge problem because many diseases actually develop before you have any symptoms. And ultimately, because of this approach and because of this lack of capacity, we currently don't see the doctor until we feel sick for the first time, which results in roughly 80% of chronic illnesses being diagnosed too late. And what I mean by too late is at the stage where it's already become chronic and you need to manage this condition, rather than when you diagnose the first deviations, at which point you can still turn around through lifestyle and maybe some mild medical interventions, but ultimately you can get back to healthy, whereas when you're diagnosed as a chronic, you probably cannot get back to healthy. And apart from having a huge impact on our personal lives, which results in decreasing life quality, possibly having to drop off work, we also create a lot of costs through that for our economy. And as much as this is pragmatic, but it is the case that insurance companies, governments, budgets, they lose money on sick people. And what I would like to talk to you today is employers and why are they involved in health generally and how does this sickness impact them. So employers, first of all, they employ roughly 80% of the working age people in Germany. So Germany is a very, let's say, a country that is very much focused on being employed in a company. And this means that people also spend the majority of their day at work. So they don't have time for anything else. If they work from 9 to 6, that's basically their day. Which means that a lot of the health issues that these people have in their private life, they bring to work. If they're sick with their stomach bug, they're not productive. If they're sick with diabetes, they're not productive. If they're sick with something else even more serious, they just drop off and they might not work for a few weeks in a row. And this results in a cost, which is a combination of two things. First is a sick leave, right? So when people don't work, you keep paying their salary for the few weeks at the beginning. However, no output is being produced. And on the second hand, there is the productivity loss that I described. So when someone is not feeling at their best, they're also not going to produce at their best. So the potential, let's say, revenue per person ultimately is decreasing. So this cost alone is estimated to be around 7,800 euro per employee per employee per year in Germany. And it has reached also a historic high in 2023. And to that, we can also add the unmeasurable costs, such as accidents that happen in the workplace because of certain health issues, such as low morale and ultimately high turnover for companies where there is a lot of sickness present. And companies do try to solve it in some way. So a very typical way would be to get something like a benefit that works for all. For instance, a membership to a gym platform where everyone can just watch different sport videos, or a discount for a gym membership offline. But ultimately, companies try to solve it by something that can just be quickly launched for everybody and they don't need to handle anything else. However, if we check reality, these benefits don't work. First of all, because they have very low engagement, because employees actually don't need them, right? So most of the time, that's not something that feels personalized. Second of all, because we see that the sickness is rising, despite those benefits being present for the last few years. And ultimately, the management deciding that they're useless, it's an expense. And now that we are seeing an economic downturn, these benefits are being cut. And this means that although companies are solving this problem, ultimately this problem isn't solved. So HealthCaters decided to solve this problem differently. And what we've built is a 360-degree analytics platform for corporate health that allows companies to first understand what the health risks in their organizations are, and then proactively manage those risks in a way that will result in the highest ROI on their corporate health budget. So the way we do it is by first helping the companies collect health data on a group level. This means understanding deeply what the health risks are today and what the health risks will be in the future. The second part, understanding how these risks actually map for their organization. So for big companies, it could be by location, by department, by job type, even by shift, right? Because workers in different shifts might have different risks. For smaller companies, it could be just gender and age split, but ultimately companies need to understand where their risks are accumulated. That's basically a heat map. And step number 3 is companies can now manage those risks and reduce disease occurrence with a very clear data set in mind, knowing what exactly they need to invest into to get the result that they want. So that's why we say Google Analytics for corporate health. So how will it impact the company if the company decides to go with HealthCaters? First of all, instead of complete lack of visibility, which companies have right now, companies will have a very clear map of health risks, which you saw on the previous slide, and they will know how to plan around it in the future. The second part is the budget consideration, right? So instead of just spending money on some random benefits that might not work, the company knows exactly how much they need to spend and where, on which people, to actually create the highest impact in their organization and create the biggest result on their budget as well. And finally, instead of having just a number of benefits that employees don't really use, so also employees are not really engaged and don't really understand why the employer is doing that, the company will have a very clear strategy going forward, choosing the benefits that employees both want and need. So the benefits will be bought and invested in with the consideration in mind that the employee is not just needed, but they also will use it. And ultimately, the company will also have a tool to control it. So to always know kind of which benefits to switch on and off for which part of the employee group and so on. The way it works for an employee, because of course, as every benefit, it's a product that is two-faced, right? So one interface is for the employer, and then the other one is for the employee, is that we need to measure health because the organization needs this metric of the group health. So the way we do it is by creating a combination of in-app health assessments and an on-site biometric screening. The in-app assessments combine things like mental health, so burnout, depression, anxiety, musculoskeletal diseases, sleep quality, stress, but also general demographic profile, your family history, your current symptoms, and current pre-existing conditions, because all of these things make a huge difference in terms of your future risks. And then the biometric screening is actually the other important part because it collects health markers that we need to identify whether you are already developing certain conditions. For instance, high blood pressure or cholesterol, or maybe lung function is reduced, in which case we will be able to combine the information that you gave us about your family and maybe existing risks with the physical data that we collect. And this would allow us to estimate your risks in a precise manner, giving you a clear view on your future and showing you your health forecast. And that's basically our second step. So we help employees not just get the data, but also understand what this data means in the context of their health. So, for instance, if I have high blood pressure, but it's still kind of in the yellow zone, so it's not extremely high, but at the same time, my family has a history of hypertension, my risks will be high because I already at this young age have a higher blood pressure. And although medically speaking, it will not be yet treatable. It does not evoke any medical interventions. Because of my history of blood pressure that is also high, I will be marked as a high-risk individual through our algorithm, because ultimately you need to take measures. You are at a higher risk than the average population. Through that risk building and through that health forecasting, we actually build a bridge for employees between the data and action, because we understood through a lot of user interviews that many people don't take action because they actually don't really know why they should. So this health risk is exactly what we need to actually build motivation to take action. And that's actually the final step in our app. That's the ultimate prevention program that is built based on your risks, and that helps you try something new every day, or maybe something that you already know, but take an action every day to reduce the risks that were identified. And this is how we close the full circle. These programs are normally provided for 12 months. And throughout the 12 months, employees can measure their risks multiple times throughout the year. They can see the dynamically updated health forecast, and then, of course, take actions every day to improve it. How it works. So, of course, this data is not just, going into the plain air and then someone does it manually, because this would be very unscalable. So we actually built a proprietary algorithm, and it's been done by my co-founder and our medical advisory board. So this algorithm actually analyzes over 80 different data points per person at a time. And this data points, I think I already briefly mentioned what we take into account. And then through this analysis, we create a set of interventions that are next steps for this person. So first of all is the health forecast, which I already explained. However, the ultimate next steps could be, first of all, medical recommendations. So you could read some recommendations for this specific type of risk that are general. The second part is this ultimate customized prevention plan. And then finally, the third part is referral to a doctor. So we also do refer people to a doctor if we think that the risk is already very high and they need to have some medical support and medical guidance. And by aggregating all of this data, not just on the individual level, but also on the company level, and obviously anonymizing it to ensure employee privacy, we create a dashboard and ultimately the tool for the company that helps them understand at every point in time, what is the situation right now? Where do I need to pay attention? How should I spend this limited budget that I have to get the highest return on investment? And what should be the things that I offer based on HealthCaters evaluation to improve the employee health in the best possible way? So as a company, what you gain is you save money, because ultimately you decrease sickness and you improve the effectiveness of your corporate health budget. You also improve productivity, because healthy employees are more productive, and at the same time, employees are more engaged, which ultimately does help with productivity as well. And of course, you increase retention, because we all know corporate brand is important for engagement. So if employees think you're doing a lot for their health, they would prefer to stay with you as an employer. At the same time, for the employees, we save their time, because actually going for a checkup and actually getting all of the tests that we provide within this checkup would be a nightmare. We also build awareness, so we help them understand how to move from point A to point B and where they stand now on this journey. And finally, we tell them what the next steps are and help them kind of get a low-hanging fruit in terms of prevention, and then decide on their own how to improve it going forward. We currently have 3 plans. It's all charged on an annual basis. So we have one plan that is fully digital, which will include a digital health risk assessment for each employee, and then a basic risk mapping for the company. The second plan includes one biometric screening on site, and ultimately all the other digital health risk assessments that are already in the app. And finally, the last plan includes 2 screenings and also a 12-month prevention plan. And of course, all of them include a very clear and detailed health risk map for the company and all the dashboards that you've seen in the previous slides. We've been in the market for 12 months by now, and we've seen some great traction. So we have brands like Merck, Lilia, IBM, and ThyssenKrupp, which are 60,000, 100,000 people companies already working with us. And ultimately, the reason for them to do that is because they see actual health improvement in their employees, and they see the happiness and satisfaction in the short run. And in the long run, they already see improved health metrics as well, which are forecasted to improve sickness days and productivity. And maybe just the last point, that's a data point that I think could be very interesting. We've collected some real-world evidence on the employee group that we've screened so far. Generally, this is the stats that we are seeing. So around 30% of employees actually have at least one high risk. And some of them have been referred to the doctor following our checkup. And we have identified 6 people with reported diagnosis so far, which is basically lives saved ultimately. In terms of the medium risk, around 40% of employees have a medium risk, at least one. And out of them, through our prevention journey, 109 employees have already decreased it back to the green one. So ultimately, this is working. This is real impact. And if we would have to calculate the cost savings in terms of lost productivity, lost work days, and so on and so forth, this is around 6 million euros just on this 2,300 employees alone. And that's it. I mean, our team, it's me, my co-founder, who is a brilliant doctor, and a lot of other very cool people from the startup and HR tech and medical side. So we are building this product for the last 3 years and super happy to see it finally coming to life. That's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your presentation. That was really cool and actually super interesting to see how your company evolved. I remember talking to you, I don't know, years ago in the Stone Age when I think you hadn't even founded it yet. It was super early. I don't even know if you had the current product idea already. So it's super cool to see how far you've come. Yeah, so maybe for the others, a quick reminder to actually use the question section. One person, Rudy, already used it, so that's pretty cool. And I entered some questions too. So I'll just start with some of the questions. So from Rudy, one of the questions was, how did you select the different health and biomarkers you are assessing and how frequently are you measuring? So I guess like in short, like how did you select the things you're measuring?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we looked at two things. First is what creates the majority of the sick days for companies. And the second one is what creates the longest sick days for companies. So we can kind of looked at it from a company P&L perspective. And we have identified that things that create most sickness days right now are mental health, musculoskeletal diseases, chronic diseases, and cancer. And the longest ones among them were also related to cardiovascular disorders, diabetes, so metabolic health disorders, and things like COPD, so chronic pulmonary disease. And then my co-founder basically went through a ton of parameters that would help us identify those diseases with the highest probability. And then she picked the ones that we can also offer to companies as a self-test, because that's actually one part that maybe I didn't explain very clearly, but all of our biometric screenings are offered as a self-test for employees. So there's no one on site doing them. And so we picked the ones that employees could be comfortable doing on their own, but at the same time, that create clinical evidence for us to say that this person has this risk. And ultimately, in combination with other in-app assessments, we were able to reach a high level of algorithm precision. So for us, this was important.
Interesting. And how does it work for mental health? Because I think mental health isn't mental health like one of the probably like the leading cause of sick days or so? I'm not sure. I think I read a statistic somewhere. Like how do you screen for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, it depends on the industry, right? And depends on the industry and on the age group. So mental health is the leading cause of sick days in younger population. So in Germany, there's this concept called Azubi, which is people who are finishing like college and basically getting like in company education, and they normally work for a couple of years with the company. So the mental health is the leading cause of sickness for those people, and they're between like 18 and 25 normally. And then industry-wise, it's more common among like white-collar workers, so insurance, banking, consulting, and so on. Versus if we take a production site or production facility, then of course the sickness will be completely different, and there will be almost 0 days taken on behalf of mental health, because it's also perceived differently there. It's very like manly driven environment. So taking the mental health day is not something you do. However, there are a lot of cardiovascular risks. There's a lot of cancer, unfortunately, lung cancer, because they're smokers. So a lot of other risks are more common there. And in terms of how we measure mental health, we have a number of clinically validated questionnaires. So there are like standard questionnaires for different clinical conditions. For example, for anxiety, there's this GAD-7. For sleep, there's something else. So those are the questionnaires that have been validated in research and that have been shown to use, that are actually currently being used by practitioners to diagnose someone with a certain condition. The only difference is we don't diagnose people. So we collect this data, but we actually create a risk assessment instead, because we are not a medical product. So we combine it with also a couple of other data points. For instance, women of a certain age are more likely to have a depressive disorder. So we kind of combine your demographics with the results of the questionnaire, potentially with some other things. And then we kind of create your health risk score rather than saying, hey, we think you have depression, because that would be already like going strongly in the medical side.
Right. Interesting. And let's see, I had this question. So you already, I think on one of your slides, you mentioned you had already like 20 customers. So how did you find the first few customers? I imagine it to be like, I don't know, as a startup, it's always a difficult sales pitch to say like, okay, we're like two random people and then we want to sell you some product, and you're like this large enterprise company. Also, you had like quite a few large companies as your customers. Like how did you go about that?
I mean, ultimately, I think the first 2 years were really tough because you have a very shitty product. Like it breaks, nothing looks nice. It all like looks like a DIY basically. And so all you can ask for is interviews, feedback, and any kind of non-sales conversation. So what we've done a lot, we've reached out to a lot of people who posted a lot on LinkedIn about prevention and how companies should invest more in employee health. So those were really kind of like pioneers in this space, and we asked them for feedback. And ultimately, after like, I don't know, 400 conversations, one insurance company said, hey, we have this client that we work with. They really want to do something. So if you want, we can try, although you guys don't have a product, so we don't even know how it will work. So then we kind of like went to IKEA, we bought this desk, we bought a bunch of medical devices, bought an iPad, put it on the IKEA desk and said, this is a health kiosk where all the employees can screen. We built a no-code app. And then after that, we had this one case client that could then refer us to other clients, which, by the way, they loved it. And they said that they've never seen innovation like this. I guess also very like country-specific feedback. But after you get your first client, I think things get easier. However, still, you have to go through connections, ask your friends. I've asked every single friend to introduce me to their employer or anyone they know who is employed anywhere else, so I could ask for another introduction. So ultimately, through a ton of HR introductions, you get to your first 5, then maybe 10. And then from there on, you understand a little bit better what your customer wants. So then we've gone to a few conferences, industry-specific, product-specific. So there are conferences on corporate health in almost every country here in Western Europe. And we've done those conferences. We've got some clients from those conferences as well. And then we started getting reference clients. So we worked with IBM, and then we got reference to Merck, and then Merck referenced us to someone else. And ultimately, like when your team becomes known among very like nice blue chip corporates, they all talk to each other, right? Because it's a small world, and then you get more and more and more and more visibility.
Cool, very cool. Was there like one particular, like if you think back to the first customer with the IKEA desk, was there like one particular thing they really liked? Like, I don't know, like blood pressure or something else? Was there like this one feature they really liked, or was it just like really the collection of different measurements you were doing?
I think the fact that you can do your own checkup and be your own doctor was by far the most interesting to people. So that's exactly the quotes that they were saying, wow, I can be my own doctor. And I think that was so fascinating for obviously early adopters, right? Not everyone wants to do that, but people who did that, who came and who did the whole experience on their own with like instructions and devices, they followed it, they did it on their own, they used the app to see the results, and people were just like, wow, this is awesome. So I think the whole reinvention of the checkup experience, the fact that you can actually get all of these parameters at once, you don't have to like ask the doctor to send you to different doctors. You can just take it all in one place in half an hour at your workplace. I think this whole ease and convenience combined with the digital journey that we built, this was the part that made people like fascinated.
Cool. Another question from Rudy, who's looking into the collected health data? So maybe I guess like the expanded version of that question would be like, do you also provide like a doctor who like looks through those values in the dashboards, or do you just like hand it off to the company, your customers, and say like, here, this gives you an overview, and now it's kind of like your responsibility to like check up on those people?
So we don't provide detailed data to the company because it's data privacy, right? So it's protected. So we provide breakdowns above 30 people, not below. And we naturally work with much bigger companies, so there are way more things that we can do with a company that has 5,000 people. We can show all sorts of things to them, and normally the user of this data, if I understood the question correctly, is either the HR, so head of HR business partner, or a corporate doctor in many cases. So they also want to see this data to understand which employees to target their resources to, or it could be someone like head of corporate health management. So in large companies like Merck, Siemens, and Lilia, there's also a person responsible for corporate health management strategy, and that's ultimately the user of our dashboard of the data.
Interesting. So you aggregate like across at least 30 people. So I think like also in one of your slides, I saw this like dashboard where you like have different departments, I think, in the company, and then you can see like, I guess like a color coded system where like how they're doing on certain health metrics. But do you also like, if you have like one individual person who's like, where you find something like, I don't know, the person has actually diabetes and it's not diagnosed, or so, do you still have like the capability to kind of like find that out and then kind of like refer that person to a doctor? I guess like, I mean, you probably don't have to tell the employer in any instance, but you still have
the person, exactly, yeah. The person gets flagged in the app, and they see the pop-up that they need to see a doctor. And in some cases, we integrate with a corporate doctor. So we actually have a button, book an appointment with a corporate doctor, if the company offers that service. In others, we offer them either to book an appointment with their own doctor or with a telemedical solution. So there are some options that we currently offer in the app, but ultimately we take care of the employee, right? That's also our responsibility. We don't flag this to the employer, obviously, because this is absolutely like not what we want to do. But we make sure that we do our best to nudge this person to see the doctor. And so we continue nudging them in the next 2 months after we have identified the high risk to go to the doctor. But obviously we cannot make them, right? And the employer also doesn't see that. The only thing the employer would see is the reported outcome, but also on an aggregated basis. We will say we've identified so and so many people with the risks, right? So that's what they see in the health risk map. And then if someone went to the doctor, got a diagnosis, then we also report that. Let's say 5 people were diagnosed with diabetes based on the reference that we made to the doctor. And this is basically like the result. So they are currently pre-diabetic, for example, but if they were diabetic, then this would have resulted in such and such costs for you as a company.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really cool that I think like the what you were referring to as like a corporate doctor it's like the Arbeitsmediziner in Germany. It's like the things like occupational medicine or so. I think that's, so you're essentially kind of like interfacing between that doctor and the employees to some degree. Because I think like in the past, the experience there was actually pretty crappy. You have like this occupational doctor in the company, but maybe you get one appointment per year, and then they'll just kind of like look at you and say like, "Are you okay?" And then you'll be like, "Great." So that's actually really cool. You kind of like, as an employee, I guess the experience is way better if you can like push a button and like get an appointment with the doctor.
Exactly. But also in many cases, occupational doctors are not really looking to see patients, right? Their role primarily is to make sure that the company is functioning in accordance with the occupational health and safety legislation. So they check things like the load of, I don't know, like things that you lift up if you work in the warehouse, or your ergonomic workplace if you work in the office. But they really couldn't care less if you have diabetes ultimately. So most of those doctors are really focused on, okay, what do I need to check by law, like hearing if it's a loud environment, vision if it's a driver, and so on. But all the rest of the things aren't really in their scope. And only very few companies, mostly big brands, big employers, they actually have capacity to do more than legal minimum for health. And so in those companies, we work in collaboration with corporate doctors. But in companies where the doctor has to just do the legal minimum, they don't even want to touch it. They're like, yeah, I'm just come here once a month. I check that everyone is lifting their weight and I'm just gone.
Interesting.
Mm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember that from the hospital. Like, I think they just kind of they just check if you're kind of safe enough to adhere to the regulations and work there, and that's pretty much it. All right. So let's see. One more question. I think a small question was so do you also sell them this suitcase with the devices, or is it included in your subscription?
So we don't sell anything in terms of
Mhm.
an end product. We only do health plans. So your company will have access to a number of health plans for a number of employees. You can combine the plans together. You can mix them up. You can say everyone gets the digital plan, then those who have a medium or high risk get the middle plan, and then the employees with the most high risk, they get the 2 checkups with a third plan. So as a company, you can choose. We ship you the case for the number of days in the year that will cover all of your employees for one screening. And we have a calculation for that. Obviously, the days will be to your convenience. So it's not going to be shipped in the middle of summer holidays. We always discuss this with the company. In certain cases, a company can also book additional services, like they can book a nurse that comes with the case and that does the blood tests, for instance. They can book something like a health seminar on site from one of our doctors or health coach. So there are certain additional things that we also, let's say, give as a package, but that's not our core product. Although we help companies make the experience nice if they want to pay for this.
Cool. Yeah, interesting. Makes a lot of sense. So it's essentially just like a subscription model,
Yeah.
Based on the headcount and based on the package the company wants.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a subscription. And we've launched, so the cool thing is this subscription model and the self-testing allows us to launch in multiple markets at the same time. So for example, with ThyssenKrupp, which is a huge metals and construction company, we've launched in 3 markets so far. So we've done Qatar, Egypt, and Hungary. None of these countries currently have our presence, but we don't need to, because what we do is that we send them the health cases and all the test materials. We onboard the head of corporate health on site, and ultimately that's it. So it's a very digital-driven, employee-friendly journey, and all the employees did their checkups on their own. The companies got respective, data and reports. Everyone was happy, and we didn't have to send anyone. They didn't have anyone on site, so it works pretty well for big companies as well.
That's so cool. Wow. Yeah. And is there any reason they chose those countries? Because maybe is the existing healthcare or screening infrastructure bad, or do they have special incentives there?
It's a very good question. So I think ultimately it was the beginning, right? So I think they chose the radically suffering locations. So locations where it is really, really hard to get anyone to come because they're very remote. It's a construction site somewhere in Qatar. It's not in the middle or the capital. It's somewhere else, right? So it's very remote, hard to get a doctor. Or if the doctors are coming, it's extremely expensive. So the company also doesn't want to pay a fortune on these checkups. And I think this is kind of the concept of who is so unhappy with the current solution that they will be willing to try a small startup, right? And if you think ThyssenKrupp is one of the largest employers in the world, they can have anyone they want, but none of these companies work for them. And so they decided to switch. And those are exactly the customers that startups need, right? You need to identify companies for whom for whom the existing solutions don't work under no circumstances. So they are struggling, and they will be ready to try even the shittiest MVP because you are promising to solve their problem. In our case, it wasn't a shitty MVP anymore, luckily, but because I think ThyssenKrupp still has quite high standards for their employee health. But if you think about the company with 60,000 people worked with a 9-people startup, obviously, they could have had someone very, very large doing this. But we solved their current problem for those locations. And because the experience was so good and because what they've got was extremely valuable, now we are getting like a lot of requests from other locations, and we're working with a global health team here in Germany to see how we can roll it out to more countries, more places, more locations, and so on.
Oh, that's so cool. Could you would it be fair to say across all your customers that they generally choose other countries and not like Germany, where maybe you could say the healthcare infrastructure is still pretty good? I guess depends, but is that true that they tend to choose maybe developing countries or countries with bad healthcare infrastructure? Or would you also say no, we also have a ton of companies using this in Germany in their German locations?
That's actually the only case apart from our UK client, but that was purposeful UK market outreach, that the other companies are fully German. They're offering in Germany, so this is kind of an outlier. I think a lot of the times we need to think about where those companies are. A lot of locations are smaller cities that are built around one big company. Let's take Mille. Mille is located in Gütersloh, Bülow, and Bielefeld, and those are quite small towns in North Rhine-Westphalia, and there's not an abundance of great medical facilities or something, and people can't get an easy appointment. So when we talk to people on site, they have not seen a doctor in 9 to 10 years sometimes because they're still healthy, or so they think. And I think this factor of convenience and time saving and the no need to make an appointment, it's underestimated how much people hate that part right now already. So it's quite bad. Yeah. And the fact is that people still can get treatment in Germany. I believe so. I've gotten things kind of expedited if they were flagged, but to get to the point when you're flagged, you literally can die before that. So I think a lot of people are very aware that the system is very skewed right now with a focus on treatment, and prevention is just not part of it anymore. So we have no problem convincing people to come for a checkup. We're always 100% booked out.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, that might be quite an opportunity now. I think it'll get increasingly hard for publicly insured people to get appointments, I think, when a lot of doctors retire. I think it's already, in many cities, it's already a very bad situation right now. So that might be very interesting, yeah.
And then you have, on top of that, aging population, right? So aging population has a higher incidence of chronic illness. And if you go to any Hausarzt or GP practice in Germany, you see people over 75 all over the place, right? They're just sitting there in line. So, and they have time. They have time to wait. So you have no time to wait, and you still need to check yourself. So what do? You don't have many options.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Yeah. All right. I think let's do 2 more questions to not so you can also have dinner later, hopefully go to sleep. Maybe how about this one? Who are your main competitors? That would be interesting because I don't know this space very well, and your offering also sounds quite unique actually. Do you even have competitors in the classical sense?
Not in the classical sense, but there are a lot of companies offering digital interventions, right? So if a company doesn't want to think much about what to offer, they would normally get a platform with a lot of digital courses for everybody, where everyone can find something. Ultimately, that's the easiest choice. You just pay a fixed fee per company, and everyone has an app that they can use for training or nutrition or something. Those are ultimately they are truly easy to implement, but as I mentioned before, very low engagement rate normally. There are platforms that, there are companies that do traditional corporate health checks. So they would send you a nurse, a doctor, and they will be on site for a day. They normally do 15 to 20 checkups per day. This is more expensive. This is not digital, so you'll get your result maybe on a little piece of paper. But for large companies, it's just not an option, right? Because it's not scalable, it's too expensive, and then there's no impact that they can measure because this data is not being in any way digitized or aggregated. So I think in a sense, we are kind of combining 2 things. first, the complexity and comprehensiveness of our checkups allow us to really build deep analytics for the company. And then on the second hand, we are very scalable and very digital friendly. And so we can actually work with large companies while keeping the cost low. So in this sense, I think we're quite unique. But obviously, things might change every second.
Very cool. All right, to wrap up, maybe only one big question, like maybe what's your number one lesson you learned now growing? I mean, like I think you went from like just, I guess, like having an idea together with your co-founder to like getting a lot of funding and growing this company. Like what's like the number one lesson which you would give to like, I guess, like startup founders or people considering being startup founders in the healthcare space?
I think two things probably. So first thing, never stop talking to your customers, because I think a lot of startups, they kind of figure out one thing, they think this is it, they start building. But while they were doing that, a lot of things have changed, sentiment changed, someone launched something else. And ultimately, I think you need to build in small marginal pieces of product, and then talk to your customers and figure out what they want and move in the direction of what they want. And don't build something that you want to see, because it might not be the thing that customers want to see. And I know this is kind of very typical startup advice, but even us in our journey, having read all the books by the time we have founded the company, still is super easy to get carried away. So now, like, I have a call with at least 5 customers myself every week, B2B customers. Even if we know what we're building, we have sales, like everything's doing great, I'm still talking to at least 5 customers per week, because if I don't, I personally lose touch with the person that is buying our product, and that is a huge mistake. And the concept of product market fit is also very volatile. So you might have reached one stage of it, but not the second, not the third, and not the fourth. So when founders first feel the pull, they just go all in, but that might not be the right PMF. There's multiple levels of product market fit that you need to also think about. And specifically for health industry, I would say a lot of people will be skeptical. You will hear a lot of people saying this will never work. People will not share the data. No one will do this. Doctors are great. And you're competing with the doctors. So bad, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of the negative attitude towards you trying to disrupt something. And ultimately, these people have their best intentions in mind, but you just do you. And if you believe that you're solving a problem, and that there are people who confirm that by buying into that, go forward. There always will be skeptical people or skeptical buyers, but it doesn't mean that there is no market. Ultimately, if you only hear yes when you explain your idea, then you're doing something very obvious, might be a tar pit, because it might be that other people have tried this before, but it never worked. So if you are hearing a lot of no's, continue. This is probably not obvious, so you can be the one solving the problem.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, that sounds like you're solving a big problem. Like the last sentence was very cool, because I heard a lot of yeses when doing regulatory consulting, and that was it's also kind of like a problem everyone struggles with, but maybe it's not as hard of a problem to solve as employee health, because there are a lot of regulatory consultants, and regulations still suck and are completely unsolved for companies. So, but I think what you're doing is kind of more exciting. So
it depends how you look at it. Everything is exciting if you look at it in the right angle.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, let's end it there. Thanks so much again for your time, Tatyana, and joining us, even though it was a way less smaller group this time. Probably, I have to next dinner or coffee is on me, as I may or may not have promised a larger group. But super cool. And it was really, really interesting, because your company, in my opinion, is really much more interesting than many other startups, because you already have these customers, you have revenue, and you have a finished product. One benefit might be it's less regulated than the typical medical device, for example, so you can iterate faster. A lot of very cool things, but I think the coolest thing really is having those customers and revenue and that feedback loop, essentially. And very cool that you shared a lot of those insights.
I said our investors also got really excited about this. So Definitely.
I can imagine, yeah. Probably in this space, the investors usually don't see companies like that.
Quite, yeah, hard sometimes.
Yeah,
But I mean, we're still at the beginning, and
right.
ultimately, the way to a unicorn is still quite long. But I think as long as you speak to your customers, use the data, build what they want, and build a product that people love, you're going to get there.
Awesome. Cool. Great. Thanks so much, Tatyana. And
everyone who joined, thank you for cutting out your evening time. Happy to meet you all. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just type in my name. I hope I will be the first person popping up. And happy to answer any questions also in LinkedIn chats and so on. Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you, Oliver.
Great. See ya. And thanks for your time.
Bye.